And a good Monday evening, everyone. Welcome in. Jeremy Plonk from BET and Xpressbet, horse player now on Twitter. We are taking a look at our rapid reaction for tonight's Breeders' Cup post-position draw. All 14 races for 5 on Friday, 9 on Saturday. The championships have been drawn at a ceremony in Pasadena, California, nearby Santa Anita Park in Arcadia. So we know the fields now for the 14 races. We're going to reveal those to you here on the podcast, give you the graphics from Breeders' Cup of all the starters and all the races, and give you my quick reaction to what we saw. No huge surprises, no big defections, things like that to discuss at this post-position draw. So let's get right to it. With our Friday races, we're going to start things off talking about the Juvenile Turf Sprint. Juvenile Turf Sprint lines up this way across the way. We've got a field of 12. Capacity field is just 5/8 of a mile on the turf. They've run 6.5 in the Turf Sprint races at Santa Anita in the past for the Turf Sprint. For the Juvenile Turf Sprint, it was 5.5. This year, just 5/8 of a mile. Big news here, Big Evs, the 4 is the morning line favorite from John White's morning line. Official track line maker at Santa Anita has the odds-making duties for the Breeders' Cup. He made Big Evs the 3-1 favorite here. This is interesting. You've got a Euro to the inside in Tiger Bell. You've got a lot of speed to the inside in No Name Mets. Probably the fastest of the American horses. But Big Evs is as fast a gate horse from Europe as I have seen on video. Extremely fast. So not a bad draw there for the 4-hole for Big Evs. And being outside of No Name Mets, probably not a bad thing there. That's probably the primary horse that you're going to have to worry about early on. Interesting draw here as well for the 11 Slider. If you saw the replay of the Speakeasy Stakes, the John Sadler trainee blew the turn and then came back to win the race. From the 11 hole with a quick run into the first turn, I would have liked to seen Slider closer to the inside. Could lose a lot of ground in here if he doesn't clean up his antics from that Speakeasy Stake. So maybe the loser of the draw, Slider in here. Big Evs draw as well. It's going to be tough for the 2 No Name Mets with all that speed because he's got a ton of speed to his outside in the favorite Big Evs, the 4-horse, at 3-1 odds. So that's the way we see things for the Juvenile Turf Sprint. That'll be race number 5 on Friday's card. Let's turn the page to the Juvenile Fillies. 13 will go in this one. Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies at 1 1/16 at Santa Anita. Fairly short run to the first of 2 turns in here. The big favorite, the biggest favorite of all on Breeders' Cup Day is Tamara. She's 4-5 in the morning line. She's coming off back-to-back wins. Del Mar won the Del Mar Debutante over 7/8 of a mile. Now, she's never gone around 2 turns. So whenever you've got a horse going around 2 turns for the first time, I like to see him with some horses outside of him because that first turn is going to come up on Tamara awfully fast. Remember, Del Mar Debutante started on the backstretch in the chute, had a very long run to the one and only turn in that race. You want to have some horses to your outside as you're an inexperienced horse stretching out around 2 turns for the first time, kind of keep you hemmed in a little bit. Starting right in the middle of the field, it couldn't have worked out better for Tamara. That's really where you want to see her. If she's good enough, then the post position certainly is not going to hurt her. Whether she can handle the 2 turns or not at a short price, that's up to you as a handicapper. Other notes in the Juvenile Fillies as we look at this field of 13, Candy drew the rail. This is a horse who's got a late run about her, closed nicely to win up the inside and rallied nicely, and then made a big move on the turn at Keeneland to win the Alcibiades. She'll be able to save ground. Good draw there. Tough draw for the 12, just FYI. I kind of liked her, and I was thinking about picking her on top. I'm not so sure about trying to pull the upset now from post 12. This will be her 2-turn debut. She went the Frazette Stakes around 1 turn at Aqueduct last time. I prefer having some horses to your inside, like I just talked about. So just FYI, hitting 2 turns for the first time and having to do it from way outside in the 12 hole could lose ground on the first turn. That's going to be a difficult one there. Bright Work, the 9, could be the speed of this race and start clearing over horses. That's the one you want to watch, kind of any chain reaction going into the clubhouse turn. So Tamara being just inside of Bright Work, the Bright Work and the 9, Tamara and the 7, could get a little dicey going into the first turn there, and she hasn't run around 2 turns. So maybe Tamara's in a little bit of a bad neighborhood. If Bright Work crosses over in front of her, we shall see. Candied, I think, probably wins the draw amongst the horses in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies with her late running style, saving ground into the first turn. And then maybe, just maybe, Tamara gets into a little bit of trouble, and you got just FYI out in the 12 hole as the principal horses in this race. So Candied, probably the post-draw winner in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies. To the Juvenile Fillies Turf, we will go next. The Juvenile Fillies Turf is at 1 mile on the grass, a capacity field of 14 here with 2 also eligibles. Maybe an interesting runner here is the 6 Porta Fortuna at 5-1 in the morning line. Interesting that this European goes in this spot instead of the turf sprint. Was a strong finisher in the Cheveley Park, sprinting last time. Now stretches out. Again, that was a straightaway race. Now going 2 turns. So a short run into the first turn at a mile on grass, then has to negotiate 2 turns. I kind of want to see this horse in the turf sprint, but Porta Fortuna going to be aimed at the juvenile Fillies turf here, going the mile. Outside of the gate, Dream Fire's got a lot of speed from SoCal, going to have to go from that outside post under Hector Barrios. So you could start to see a little chain reaction there with a very short run to the first turn, speed into the 13 hole. The horse is just to the inside of the 13 as that one tries to cross over the field. Could be in a bit of a bad neighborhood there. So maybe you want to lay the horses to the inside in this as far as the one's advantage. Number 3, Buku, rallied from well off the pace and finished strong at Keeneland. Last time out, the 3 hole looks like a good spot for that one. Buttercream Bay, Flattery. Again, I think the horses to the inside of the gate are in the better spot here in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies Turf. Not only do they get to save ground, but again, you won't have Dream Fire kind of sawing everybody off maybe from the outside. The 11, She Feels Pretty, is the morning line favorite at 4-1. That's a tough outside post there for the 2-for-2 lifetime Natoma winner. A deep closer, though, for Cherie DeVoe. This one is She Feels Pretty. So she's going to drop out of there. I don't think Dream Fire crossing over is going to be a big deal because Dream Fire is probably going to be 2 lengths in front of She Feels Pretty, 2 jumps out of the starting gate. So She Feels Pretty kind of drops back out of there and then tries to make a late run. Interesting field in the Juvenile Fillies Turf, 14 of them to go in that one. We'll move next and talk about the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. The Breeders' Cup Juvenile, to me, is always the headline race on Friday. I know the Juvenile Turf is the final on Friday, but they try to alternate the turf and dirt races. The Juvenile's the headliner, right? We want to see who could be the top horse for the Kentucky Derby next year and get excited towards the countdown to the Crown Trail. Breeders' Cup Juvenile this year's got what we expect most years, right? You've got the regional heavyweights all clashing in the Breeders' Cup, and all the big winners are here in this year's Breeders' Cup Juvenile. 11 will go in the field. You've got Timberlake, the big winner in New York. You've got the winner at the Breeders' Futurity at Keeneland and locked for Todd Pletcher. Then you got Bob Baffert's 2 horses in California that he split up. Muth won the local prep, the American Pharoah, going around 2 turns. Prince of Monaco won the Del Mar Futurity around 1 turn and then laid off and didn't run in a final prep around 2 turns. So let's see how the Breeders' Cup Juvenile lines up and how this race may shake out. Our reaction to the post draw in this field of 11 is that the Baffert horses to the inside in post 2 and 3 did very well for themselves because the Wine Steward for Mike Maker down on the rail doesn't really have much early pace. Prince of Monaco and Wind Me Up. Wind Me Up's the horse who led almost the entire way before being run down by Muth in the American Pharoah Stakes. So you got the 2 and 3 for Baffert to the inside. Timberlake's not that fast, a horse who wants to sit a little bit. I think the Baffert horses are in a really good spot here in post 2 and 3. Move to the outside's got it a little bit tougher, obviously, from the 10 hole, but I think the Bafferts kind of control the pace in this particular race, and they're in a good spot. Locked is a horse who was, to me, a bit one-paced and had every chance at Keeneland, and I wasn't enamored with the way he kicked home, so he's going to have to kind of collar 3 wide around a couple Baffert speed horses and then kick on. He's the 7-2 morning line favorite. I think he's a little vulnerable on paper, and you guys know I love the Keeneland races as much as I handicap those and study them. I'm not enamored about Locked. I like Candied a lot better coming out of the Alcibiades and the Juvenile Fillies than I do Locked coming out of the Breeders' Futurity for the boys and taking on the Colts here in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. So we shall see in here. I do think the 2 and the 3, though, are in the best spots here. Prince of Monaco and Wind Me Up. Wind Me Up's going to run a long way in here under those Pegram McDonald silks in the yellow and red. Wind Me Up's going to take him a long way in this particular race, just like he did in the prep race in the American Pharoah. So that's a look at the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. Breeders' Cup Juvenile will be race number 8 on the card. And really, I think, this is a good one for the Baffert runners in this particular spot. Other speed in this race could be General Partner, the 8 from the outside. I don't know if that's California speed, though. So the 8 could press a little bit out in the 3 path. But the 2 and the 3, I think, kind of control this pace down towards the inside. To the Juvenile Turf we go. The final race on the Friday program at Santa Anita. It'll be the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf at a mile on the grass. 14 hole for Carson's Run. Tough draw here for a mid-pack closer who won the Summer Stakes at Woodbine last time. Of course, that's a 1-turn race, the Summer Stakes at Woodbine. So Carson's Run's got to go 2 turns from the 14 hole. When you're out that far in the 14 post, you can win from out there. And we've seen it over the years. There's been some great fillies win a Breeders' Cup Mile from out in the parking lot. Some colts have done it as well. You can win from out there, but you don't want that kind of mid-pack style. So you either got to commit to dropping back or you got to commit to going forward. And with the running style for Carson's Run, I think kind of loses the post position draw here in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf. That's going to be a tough post position for this particular running style, especially to overcome. Some of the others notes that you want to mark here, there's not a ton of speed in this race. My boy Prince may be loose on the lead from post 5. That's the Cup and Saucer winner for Mark Cassie. Good draw for that one. Not stuck down to the inside, not outside. 5-hole, a beautiful draw with not much speed to the inside. My boy Prince gets the best of the post draw here. I don't know if he's good enough. He was good against restricted company in Canada. The open company race, he got nailed at the end. I don't know how far he can take him, but my boy Prince under Joel Rosario's got to take him as far as he can in here, the way this race shakes out on paper. Interesting jockey note in this race, River Tiber, the 2, and Unquestionable, the 8, are the 2 Aidan O'Brien trainees in here that were both ridden in recent races by Ryan Moore. Moore takes the 2 River Tiber. That leaves Unquestionable an open mount. Frankie Dettori picks up the mount. Nothing wrong with that. You certainly don't lose much in the saddle. But amongst the Coolmore clan with the 2 and the 8, Aidan O'Brien and company, they believe River Tiber's the stronger by the naming of Ryan Moore in the saddle. That is pretty universal with that barn. You can read into it. They like River Tiber slightly better than Unquestionable. And that's the same way that John White, morning line maker at Santa Anita, has them lined up 3-1 and 4-1 respectively with these 2. It's been a good history in the Juvenile Turf for Aidan O'Brien. So would not be surprised that all of the grade 2 Coventry winner, Ryan River Tiber's the one to beat in here, or the French Group 1 placed in here, Unquestionable. Those 2 would seem to have their way. The 14 to the outside, again, a very tough post position for Carson's Run. The speed of this race could come from the 5, and if you're looking to try to get a little bit of price in there amongst the Aidan O'Brien horses, maybe the 5, My Boy Prince. Evaluate his form, go back and watch his replays. He's benefited by the race shape of this race, and he's benefited from a nice post position draw. So the post draw winner, I think, My Boy Prince. We're just going to find out if he's good enough to take advantage of that. So that's a look at the 5 races on Friday, our rapid reaction tonight from the Breeders' Cup post draw. We're live here. If you're watching the archive, we're live at about 9:35 Eastern. So the draw just completed in the last half hour. Made notes as we went along. We've done some advanced handicapping on the Breeders' Cup. So this is where we stand as of Monday night. Of course, we've got a lot of water to go under the bridge with some final training. Maybe we'll see some things with horses. Haven't had great news out of the Breeders' Cup Classic division in recent days. Of course, Go Rocket Ride injured and out of that race from the pre-entries, not entered today, of course. But Arcangelo hasn't been to the track the past 2 days. That horse in the Breeders' Cup Classic. Now you start to offer some questions. Ushba Tesoro, the Japanese horse in the Classic, was a miscreant in the gate today, acting up. So we've got a lot to see yet before we get into some final picks. I'll have final picks for this Breeders' Cup card on Thursday. Be sure to check out my Substack. I'll be sending those around on Substack. So go to substack.com, and it's Jeremy.Plonk. Jeremy.Plonk, all one word with the period in between, no spaces. Jeremy.Plonk at Substack, and you can sign up, and I'll send out my Breeders' Cup selections free this year. No sales product. We'll have that. And also want to let you know, check out the Breeders' Cup Wager Guide with First Bet and Xpressbet. Outstanding wager guide. I'm part of that with a great team of handicappers all around the First family of tracks. Go to first.com/guide, 1st.com/guide, and you can download and access the Breeders' Cup Wager Guide. Ton of workout videos there, a lot of historical stats and trends that I put together, great handicapping analysis from handicappers all over the team around the country. So be sure to check that out. Profiles on all the big contenders. Breeders' Cup Wager Guide, the 20th edition of the Breeders' Cup Wager Guide. They've been running the Breeders' Cup for 40 years. For one ADW to have a Wager Guide 20 consecutive years, quite an achievement. So proud to be part of that team. Let's talk about Saturday's races now as we react to the Breeders' Cup post position draw today. We're going to start things out in race number 3. It's the Dirt Mile. It's going to kick things off on the Saturday card. And look, disappointing to only get 9 in the Dirt Mile. This is kind of an in-between race where you should have some sprinters who want to go longer. You should have some distance horses who don't want to go 1.25 miles. And you should have some second-tier horses that just don't feel they fit in the sprint or they fit in the Classic. Only 9 in here this year. Defending champ Cody's Wish draws the 3-hole. And he'll be obviously one of the main contenders in here as the 9-5 morning line favorite. He hasn't been quite as good in recent starts as he was say at the beginning of the year and at the end of last year, but he's lost just one time, that being the Whitney when they stretched him out. He wasn't good enough to go a mile and an eighth against top class company. So therefore, they didn't move forward to the classic at a mile and a quarter. He's back to try to defend his title. And obviously, he makes a lot of sense in this particular spot because it's not a Herculean field, right? You look at the names here. You do have the Preakness winner National Treasure. So you've got some repute there. Algiers was runner up in the Dubai World Cup. Those are in 9 and 7, respectively. So you've got some class there with Algiers. Zozos has speed, and Zozos is probably the fastest horse in this Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. We saw National Treasure basically go wire to wire at Pimlico in the Preakness, but he hasn't been going to the lead lately. What are they going to do from the outside under Flavian Pratt? Really the key to how this race shakes out. National Treasure drawing the outside. I don't know that they're just going to try to go blaring out and try to blast for the lead from the 9-hole in there. They may try to track Zozos around there from post 4. The other speed in here could come from the 2, Practical Move, the Santa Anita Derby winner. He's one of those versatile running styles, doesn't need the lead, but he's usually forwardly placed. He's pretty fresh with just one race since the Santa Anita Derby in April. That was a good-looking allowance win. I would not be surprised if it's Zozos in front, Practical Move second, and National Treasure sits third in here. There's just not a lot of big-time speed in this particular race, and Zozos is going to take them as far as he can. He's in really good form right now. I think he wins the post draw because he's outside of Practical Move, that the Florent Giroux can decide what he wants to do there in post 4 on the Brad Cox trainee. The outside for National Treasure's got to make them do something, right? They've got to kind of either scoot or get back, and so Zozos is just in a perfect spot here. This is a good draw for Zozos. Algiers, obviously, nothing wrong with that draw at all. For Cody's Wish, he's going to try to make a run towards the end. He's not a horse who's going to be up on the lead, not just a dead closer from far back, but he's going to save ground into the first turn, and that's what you want to do. So a good draw for Cody's Wish, no problem with that whatsoever. Practical Move's got to decide what to do. That's a tough spot for him to be in now. What does he want to do? Is he going to get tangled up with Zozos and kind of battle up front, or is he going to concede it to Zozos and then just try to pocket trip it running along the inside? And then, will Ramon Vasquez get him out a little bit and try to go around Zozos? Will he try to duck to the inside? His moves up the inside, actually, if you watch the replays, Practical Move is a really good rail closer. In some of his preps towards the Kentucky Derby, that's what I remember most about him. I love the way he was like game up the inside. And Tim Yakteen was training him back that time and still trains him today, Practical Move. He was working him inside of horses, and you could just kind of see the way he trained in the morning was the way he ran in the afternoon, which was really efficient on the inside. That might not be a bad spot at all for Practical Move. When he's into a race, he gets after it to the inside. So not necessarily a bad draw in there. The more I think about it and I go back to the history and remember studying this horse a lot in the spring. So Zozos, good draw for him. Obviously, I think maybe a good draw for Practical Move down in the 2-hole. Don't really like the draw for National Treasure out in the 9. We shall see how the Dirt Mile shakes out. Just a field of 9, though. Disappointing there from a gambling standpoint. Let's go to the Filly and Mare Turf next up. That's going to be race number 4, Filly and Mare Turf at a 1.25 miles on the grass. Oh, we hit the wrong button there. Let's get the Filly and Mare Turf up. There's the Filly and Mare Turf. We got a field of 12 in here. The 1.25 mile races at Santa Anita start on the downhill turf course. So they're going to run downhill a bit at the beginning and then one time around the course proper, as they say, and they'll complete a 1.25 miles that way. Not as tough to get a 1.25 miles at Santa Anita as other places because of that downhill run at the beginning. Not quite as demanding on the runners. 12 in here, the rail speed in Italian. And I mentioned how it's a little bit easier at Santa Anita to get a 1.25 miles than other places because in Italian is nothing but mile speed. We've seen her in the mile in the past. We saw her at Keeneland to the front recently. Her style is make the lead and take them as far as she can. She draws the rail. That is perfect. Now, down the hill, it's not exactly inside all the way to the inside. There's kind of like some S moves and things like that. So you're kind of moving in and out and getting around. But when she gets to the course proper, she'll be on the inside still with the lead probably in Italian. So that's a good scenario for her. I think she's drawn well here. And the 1.25 miles down the hill, again, may stretch her speed a little bit farther than what she's shown on paper. It is a very tough test for in Italian here, though, to get a 1.25 miles because it's not just a 1.25 mile race. This isn't the Yellow Ribbon or an American Stakes race. The Europeans who are in this race are absolutely brass tacks. She has got her work cut out for her. If she's going to win this race at a 1.25 miles on the lead, she is going to run one of the great efforts in Breeders' Cup history. And I mean that, to win this race wire to wire and beat Warm Heart. The 3-year-old filly won the Prix Vermeil, the Yorkshire Oaks. Warm Heart's the 3-1 morning line favorite. Ryan Moore, Aiden O'Brien, a ton there to love about that 3-year-old filly. Then you've got the 6 in Spiral. She's the 5-2 morning line favorite. I think I said Warm Heart was favored at 3-1. In Spiral's 5-2 is John Gaz and Frankie Dettori. This is the 4-year-old filly by Frankel, 2-time winner of the Prix Jacques Marois in France, the premier mile race there. In Spiral is absolutely a stellar turf performer. And I'm in love with Lindy. I would tell you what, that Lindy's second place finish in the Queen Elizabeth II Challenge Cup, she's got a tremendous turn of foot. And I think she is going to love a top of ground turf course like we see at Santa Anita, where it's firm and the horses stay up above. I really love the turn of foot that Lindy showed not only at Keeneland, but at Kentucky Downs in her previous race. She's a French filly with a lot of class. Since she came over here, she's run 2 good races in the United States. Be on the lookout for Lindy in the Filly and Mare Turf. I like where she drew here in the middle of the gate. Nothing wrong with that at all. Fev Rover's got some speed. She may go second in this race. I got to think an Italian goes to the front. Fev Rover sits second. That's the speed in this particular spot. Really, there's not a bad post as far as inside-outside goes when you're going down the hill like this, because, again, it kind of moves like in an S down the hill, down the hillside course. And so these runners are going to get a chance to kind of be advantaged by being outside a little bit, being disadvantaged by being outside. By the time they get to the top of the stretcher, they've run a pretty good way before they get onto the course proper, and they should be able to situate into a pretty good spot for the run across the grandstand. So Lumiere Rock is a horse to the outside that you might think is disadvantaged from being out there. Argument could be made there as far as the post position stats and things go. I don't think we're looking at any kind of major impact on the draw in this particular race. I do think it's good for an Italian where she's at. Fev Rover is going to be other speed. The 1 goes out, the 8 presses the pace, and then you're just waiting for these Europeans to come a-calling. Warm Heart in Spiral, and the French export Lindy, who's now had 2 starts here in the U.S. Didia, the Argentine mare, has just rattled off win after win after win. She's a late runner. She's going to come with a run in here. Nothing wrong with that draw whatsoever for the Paulo Lobo trainee. Didia should be awfully tough in here. She won the local prep, but horses who win the local prep at Santa Anita have not had any success whatsoever coming out of that Rodeo Drive in the Filly Mare Turf. Historically, for whatever that might mean in this year's particular history, it has not been a good prep race towards the Filly and Mare Turf. Let's go to the Filly and Mare Sprint next, and this is a really disappointing division for a couple reasons. You know, we lost the star filly for Steve Asmussen, Echo Zulu, out of this, injured about a month ago in her training and retired now. We do have the defending champ, Goodnight Olive, but boy, I was really looking forward to the matchup with Echo Zulu in the Filly and Mare Sprint, and we only get 9 from a gambling standpoint with a 6-5 morning line favorite on John White's line. I do think Society is going to get bet and bet hard. You take a look at this race with a field of 9. There is not a lot of early speed in this race. For a 7-furlong sprint, Elm Drive was a horse who I thought might make the lead in here. She didn't end up in the entry box. So when you talk about horses who didn't make it to the Breeders' Cup that we thought might be in from the pre-entries that would impact the pace, this might be the race most impacted by a horse who didn't show up. Elm Drive didn't go in the final entries for the Breeders' Cup Filly Mare Sprint, and that may leave Society loose on the lead in here. That changes things up. Ugiri from the outside's got some speed, but I don't think she's as fast as Society. The speed in this race comes from the 7 and the 9, and they start clearing over on the horses to the inside. Clearly Unhinged out of the 2. Maybe they have to send now because they're down on the inside. This looked like a horse who might want to sit a little bit, maybe third, but maybe you let the outside 2 cross over, the 7 and the 9, and Clearly Unhinged under Rispoli will kind of sit a little bit and try to sit in the pocket and then split horses or come 3 wide on the turn and see what Clearly Unhinged has. Goodnight Olive is a horse who's run from the rail 3 times in her career. She's got 2 wins and a second from the rail. She did get in a little trouble on Derby Day. Remember that race going back to the Churchill Downs Distaff where she was stuck down inside trying to rally, and Goodnight Olive couldn't get out, and they just had her hemmed in the whole way, and she got beat in that race. Goodnight Olive hasn't been as good this year as she was last year, but she's still pretty darn good, and with no Echo Zulu in this race, she's a very justified favorite in here. Maybe she gets hemmed in again down inside and she's just not fast enough and good enough and strong enough to extricate herself from a hole like she was last year when she was just rattling off, convincing victory after convincing victory. I'm not wild about Goodnight Olive from the rail, given what I saw on Derby Day. But again, that was a lot of bad luck, and it was a lot of aggressive riding to keep her hemmed in that day. How will the jockeys ride the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Sprint? Will they ride to beat her? Will they ride to just, take on their own horse and go as fast as they can and as straight as they can? We'll see how it shakes out. But interesting draw in the Breeders' Cup Filly Mare Sprint with Goodnight Olive down to the inside. It looks to me like this is Society's race to lose, though. I think she's fastest in this field, and she catches the field with not a lot of early speed. Unless Clearly Unhinged just guns out from the 2-hole, I think Society's faster than Ugiri to her outside, and we'll see how it shakes out in the Filly and Mare Sprint. That is race number 5 on the Saturday card. Let's go next up. 6th race on Saturday will be the Breeders' Cup Mile. Breeders' Cup Mile on the grass, of course, here. 8 furlongs, 14 to go. It's a capacity field. And of all the races on Breeders' Cup Saturday that look like they may have a pace advantage, this is the one. I can't remember ever handicapping a Breeders' Cup Mile in all the years. 40 editions of the Breeders' Cup. I've handicapped every single one of them. I remember them from my teen years all the way up through. I'm in my 50s now. I can't remember a mile that had a lone speed like this could potentially line up. There is no speed in this race, and Mauge just went wire to wire over 1.125 at Keeneland in a race that didn't look like it had a lot of speed in the Grade 1 Queen Elizabeth II Challenge Cup. I thought she was awesome that day, going farther than her best trip. She's graded a mile. She won the 1,000 Guineas in England. Mauge is a fantastic miler, and her last race was super sharp. If Lindy runs well in the Filly and Mare Turf earlier, I was talking about Lindy with that good rally in the QE2. If Lindy runs well in the Filly and Mare Turf, that's really going to boost the form of what you think of Mauge when we get to the Breeders' Cup Mile. But I think she's loose on the lead. So what you want in this spot is, just don't get a terrible post. Just don't get a terrible post. And when the draw comes out and you draw in the 6-hole in a 14-horse field, that's beautiful, right? I mean, there's just not a lot of speed to her inside. Drop back closers like Casa Creed and Gina Romantica. You got a horse from Japan to the inside. I mean, Mauge can just get out of there under Ocean Murphy and pick whatever spot she wants. If she wants to be 4 wide going into the clubhouse turn and drift everybody else wide outside of her and then just kind of cut the corner, he can do that. If you ever seen John Velasquez ride, that's a perfect Johnny V move. See if he can steal one out of that book. But Ocean Murphy controls this race on Mauge. It's a great post draw for that one in the Breeders' Cup Mile as potential lone speed. Favorite in the race is Songline, probably the best Japanese hope to this point in the card. The Japanese have some big chances later as well, but the $6 million earner Songline starts from post number 10 as the 5-2 favorite. A little bit outside for that one, but again, there's not much speed in this race, so it's going to be rider intent. If one of these outside horses wants to go, they're going to be able to be 2-3 paths going into the clubhouse turn because there's just not that much speed that wants to go in this particular spot. Kalina, a 3-year-old filly by Frankel. She's to the outside. I don't know what they're going to do with this Prix de la Forêt winner, but Kalina, high class. Will they kind of follow Songline around there and try to mark the favorite next to him? You see that a lot in European racing. Stay covered with that one and then try to outkick the favorite. We shall see. Exalted from the outside. I was really hoping maybe Exalted would draw better. Love the way this one's worked. Jeff Siegel and I have talked about it in our Tuesday podcast. It's official. Be sure to check that out tomorrow. But we talked about Exalted last week, training really, really well. And again, in a race where there's not that much speed, I could see Juan Hernandez getting aggressive and saying, look, we're in a 12-hole. I can read the form. There's not that much speed in here. Don't be surprised if Exalted gets into this race early. And if Exalted's in the top 3 or so going down the backstretch, could be very effective over the home course. We've seen some Santa Anita speed do well in Breeders' Cup Miles here over this course in years past. Would not be a shocker that Exalted's part of this, but I would have preferred to have a much better draw for Exalted than, say, the 12-hole. Let's take a little pause here for just a moment as we turn my page back to the final 5 races here on Breeders' Cup preview of their post-position draw rapid reaction. Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to bet the Breeders' Cup this year with Xpressbet and FirstBet. A lot of great offers. Go to our promos page at xpressbet.com, and on the app, the promos button for FirstBet will let you know all the great offers that are going on for Breeders' Cup and take advantage. There are deposit offers. There are refer a friend, double rewards for referring friends to the Breeders' Cup. So if you're already an Xpressbet or FirstBet customer and you get a chance to refer a friend to sign up for an account with FirstBet or Xpressbet, you'll get double the amount of rewards, usually $50 for a referral. Now you'll get $100 for referring a friend who signs up for a new account. So be sure to check out the promo pages either within the app at FirstBet or on the Xpressbet website or mobile device for Xpressbet and find out all the details for those promos, but get involved with us here with Xpressbet and First Bet when we wager on the Breeders' Cup come Friday and Saturday. Advanced wagering for the full Saturday card will be taken on Friday as well. No advanced wagering on the Friday card, but again, wagering for Saturday Breeders' Cup will open with Friday when wagering opens for that card. So 7th race is the Breeders' Cup Distaff on Saturday. That's the next one we take. And we talked about how the mile didn't have a lot of pace to it, right? I said it might be the only time I can remember handicapping 40 Breeders' Cup miles where I thought there's lone speed. Now we get to the Distaff, and if you look at the major preps for the Distaff over the years, the Beldame, the Zenyatta Stakes, and the Spinster, right? The big races in New York, California, and Kentucky all were won wire to wire this year. And they may not even be the speed of the speed in this race. I think the Distaff has a fabulously hot pace to it. Let's see how they drew in the post position draw just about an hour ago in Pasadena. A field of 11 has entered the Breeders' Cup Distaff. Idiomatic is the morning line favorite. She has gone from no name to the name in about 5 months. Back in April, nobody was talking about Idiomatic at the top of this division. She wasn't even in the top in her own barn. But since then, she's gone on to win the Delaware Handicap, the Personal Ensign, and now the Spinster. That is a historic sweep of 3 major historic races in the Filly and Mare division. So Idiomatic is absolutely on her game, but she's all speed, folks, and she went wire to wire in the Spinster. She wants to go to the front. She's going to have company right next door with Adair Manor, who just rattles off victory after victory for Bob Baffert, the queen of the West Coast. Adair Manor, she's all speed. Chad Brown's got the 6 in here, Shirts Results. She's speed. So the 4, 5, and 6 line up right with each other, all with speed, and it's Brad Cox, Bob Baffert, and Chad Brown. They ain't giving an inch. I mean, these are not barns that are going to say, all right, we're taking back in this particular spot. They're aggressive barns, and they've got fillies and mares who run their best up near the front. Now you also have some speed with Randomized, the 8-horse for Chad Brown. That's the other Brown in here, also with plenty of speed in here. Randomized was the wire-to-wire winner of the Beldame. So this is going to be part of the pace. If anybody takes out of that quartet, it's probably Search Results, and it's not because she wants to, it's because she has to. She's not as fast as some of the others, but there are 3, 4, 5 speed horses here, and they're all high quality in the Breeders' Cup Distaff. Hoosier Filly down on the inside, I think, is outclassed in this spot as a 3-year-old taking on older horses, but she's brilliant when she's good. So if the good Hoosier Filly shows up, I don't think she has a chance to win, but she's another horse who, with the rail, who could be part of that pace into the clubhouse turn. If Luis Saez, who's an aggressive early jockey, says, we've got to go keep our position, he might go 22 flat on Hoosier Filly to start this, and then all of a sudden, those horses are in the 4, 5, 6 starting positions are now 2, 3, 4 wide into the clubhouse turn. Again, that could have an impact when they turn for home. I'm looking for a closer in the Breeders' Cup Distaff. I don't think the post draw did the speed any favors by them drawing all right next to each other. If you can find a closer in here, I think you're going to find the winner. Clairiere obviously makes a lot of sense from off the pace. She's been in this race many times. I think Wet Paint's sneaky good in here as the other Brad Cox horse, the 3-year-old with Idiomatic, being the favored Brad Cox horse, but the race shape doesn't set up for Idiomatic. So I'm somewhere, as we talk Monday night approaching 10 o'clock, I'm somewhere in the Wet Paint or Clairiere decision to make category right now on which closer I'm going to end up settling in on for the Breeders' Cup Distaff. We'll see how it shakes out, get a little bit of time, and watch these horses train over the next couple days, right? That's what we're trying to do. At this point in the game, I know these horses. I followed them all year long. A lot of you as horse players and handicappers do as well. I'm not talking down to you. Some of you players out there are ones who play just your region and you don't watch the national scene so much. So for you, you're kind of like really in the handicapping process now. For me, I'm in the tie-breaking process. I know these horses. I've seen their races. Now I need to break ties, right? Because I know what they can do. Who's going to be the better price, who's training best coming up to the last minute, where might we find the value, who got the best or worst of the post draw. So I'm about breaking ties over the next couple of days. That's why somebody on Twitter asked the other day, why do you want the advanced PPs for the pre-entry so early? It's just another horse race. That's how you get prepared to this point. Now we're breaking ties instead of starting fresh and just trying to handicap the races straight up to this point. So we'll see. I think a closer wins the Breeders' Cup Distaff. We're going to try to evaluate between 2 of them right now, Clairiere and Wet Paint. Wet Paint's going to be the bigger price of those 2, almost certainly. So that's probably where I'll end up, but we've got some time to figure that out. Breeders' Cup Turf next up as we go to race number 8, 1.5 miles on the grass. grass, 13 to go in here. So almost a capacity field. Some years we get a shorter field for the Breeders' Cup Turf. So this is not bad at all, especially given the quality that we have. This is one of the best additions of the Breeders' Cup Turf in history. $4 million on the line. Opting here to run is Up to the Mark, as expected, was also pre-entered in the mile. I've talked about this for a couple weeks. I think Up to the Mark would have been better in the mile. And, I think this is a much tougher spot. So I'm not a fan of Up to the Mark stretching out. Has never run beyond the 1.25 miles in the Manhattan on Belmont Day. Has just one race since that race in June. And it was a delightful effort. I mean, a great effort in the Coolmore Turf Mile at Keeneland. Beat a really good Appleby horse on the wire. Good European. Excellent effort. Fantastic effort. Back on the work tab quickly. So everything is going right for Up to the Mark. I just don't like the 1.5 miles. That's the difference for me. So we shall see, because this is a world-class field. Augusta Rodin in here is a two-time Derby winner this year, the Irish Derby, the Epsom Derby. Just fantastic. He'll break from post number 5, 3-1 in the morning line. High caliber runner there for Aidan O'Brien and Ryan Moore. Augusta Rodin may not even be the best European in this race, though. That's how good it is. Mostadaf is the morning line favorite. This one for Mostadaf is a John Gosden trainee coming out of a big win last time out in the Champions Stakes. Mostadaf, high class, big time runner in here. King of Steel's coming off a win. I believe King of Steel is the one who won on Champions Day. Mostadaf is the horse who won the Juddmonte International. I don't have my PPs in front of me, but all just like really high class races in Europe, and they're sending their good ones over this year. This is not the horses who come over from Europe that ran 8th, 9th, 10th in the ARC and still win the Breeders' Cup Turf. These are like the best of the best horses in Europe this year. Mostadaf is fantastic. Augusta Rodin, fantastic. You got the Japanese runner in here, Sharir down on the inside. Onesta's of high quality. King of Steel, super high quality to the outside. Again, just winning Group 1 company last time. The Americans are up against it in this spot. I'm sorry to say. Warlike Goddess, the mare, she's run well over her career. This is a tough spot. I know she's a pure 1.5 mile horse. 13 holes, not going to do her any favors going the 1.5 mile trip. But this race has got to come down to those 3 big-time Europeans in here. The 9, Mostadaf, the 5, Augusta Rodin. And to the outside then would be King of Steel, the 11. It just seems like it has to run through there. From a pace standpoint and a post-draw reaction, the speed in here obviously is Get Smoking, the 6. He's just going to go bolting out of there. Balladeer from the 12 is going to show speed for the Papa Pajamu barn with Victor Espinoza riding. Speed in this race comes from the 6 and 12. Neither one has much chance to live it, I don't think, for any of the big pieces in this race. So you're looking at 4 or 5 really good Europeans, a good Japanese runner in here. And if Up to the Mark can finish top 3 or 4 in this race, it will be a fantastic effort on his behalf. 5-1 in the morning line. Irad Todd having a great year. Horse of the year. I'll call it right now. Horse of the year of Up to the Mark wins this race. I think you look at winning on Derby Day in the Turf Classic. You win in the Manhattan. You win the Coolmore Turf Mile at Keeneland. And if you could beat this international field with what's happened in the Classic division this year and no huge standout, I think he could be Horse of the Year in America with a win. He will have earned it if he beats this field in the Breeders' Cup Turf. It is one of the best turf fields we've seen. Speaking of the Breeders' Cup Classic, the field for the $6 million main event includes 13 runners. 13 runners in the Breeders' Cup Classic. We didn't get a complete full field in here. Had the dropout of a runner or two that allowed some also eligibles to get into the field. Of course, the most noteworthy of the dropouts was Go Rocket Ride, the winner of the Haskell and runner-up in the Pacific Classic, injured in training the other morning. So here's the field. John White's morning line has number 12, Arabian Night, the 3-1 morning line favorite. That's the winner of the Pacific Classic for Bob Baffert, and he is training like King Kong, folks. If he is good enough, he will run his race, and it'll be a winning race in the Breeders' Cup Classic because he couldn't be doing better. I love the way he's training. I'm not a Baffert cheerleader. I'm not somebody who picks his horses just because it's Bob Baffert, but this horse is absolutely training lights out. He is going to be a hard out in the Breeders' Cup Classic. The horse he's got to beat, though, is the Japanese runner in here, Ushba Tesoro, winner of the Dubai World Cup. Ushba Tesoro is a horse who has a ton of talent, much respect for what he's done on the worldwide stage. His career form, he's a veteran. He's not over-raced, but just brings it every single time. Couple questions in here, what we've seen in the last few mornings, this morning specifically. Again, if you're watching this live, you know it's Monday night. If you're catching this throughout the week, this was recorded on Monday night after the post draw. Monday morning at Santa Anita today, some really disconcerting news in the classic division, as Arcangelo did not train today, has a shoe problem, a foot problem with the shoe for the second day in a row. That's not good news for Arcangelo, missing that. One day after a work walk, and that's okay. Second day, you start to worry, especially in a good weather place like Santa Anita. You might walk the shed row in bad weather for 2 days after a work, but not when the weather's good. That's not a good sign for Arcangelo. Doesn't mean you have to toss him out at this point. This is why we're breaking ties at this point, right? I mean, we're trying to figure out as we get closer, but that's not a good vibe for Arcangelo. The other one, and I mention it now because we were talking about the Japanese horse, Ushba Tesoro. This horse went to the gate today and just completely lost, his marbles and did not respond well, being in a different starting gate. Will that be an impact when we get the race day? We've seen it here at Santa Anita. Remember the great incident at the gate with Quality Road, now well known as a sire, but when Quality Road was in the Classic, the long delay we had. The horses start a mile and a quarter at Santa Anita, kind of up against like the very, very, very top of the back stretch, or of the home stretch, I should say. Is it a little tighter there? Whatever. We're going to see if Ushba Tesoro will behave in the starting gate and whether or not you want to make that part of your handicapping process. Now, the connections did say it would go back to the gate, I believe, on Wednesday. So, again, this is where we keep our research going. Right now, are you concerned about Ushba Tesoro? Other than that incident in the gate, all indications from what I've seen on video and what people have talked about and reported, the horse looks great coming off the ship and out of quarantine and doing well here at Santa Anita. Ton of respect for the form on paper, what we've seen on video from Ushba Tesoro. But let's see what happens and what you want to do in the starting gate. And if you do think this horse is a problem in the starting gate, let's see who's around him, right? Is that a bad neighborhood? Ushba Tesoro is in the 8-hole. Fortunately, from a handicapping standpoint, if he is a bad gate actor, look at the horses around him. Clapton's going to be a big-time long shot. Senior Buscador, a big long shot. Dreamlike, a big long shot. They're probably not going to be any impact. If he's kind of thrashing a little bit in the gate and acting up, unless he delays the start and there's like some big incident like we saw with Quality Road back in the day, it's probably not going to impact some of the other horses. They're not in what I call a bad neighborhood for my quarter horse handicapping. If you got a horse who's bad in the gate, left, right, coming out, bad standing in the gate, you don't want to be next to them. The horses that we're talking about next to Ushba Tesoro are not horses that you're probably going to have in your win and exacta considerations. They're bottom of the tries and supers, if that, in terms of the main contenders in here. Arcangelo, way the heck away from him. Zandon, way the heck away from him. White Abario, way away from him. Arabian Night, Proxy, way away from him from the outside. So in terms of the draw, I think being away from Ushba Tesoro is a good thing, and therefore I don't see any negative to this post draw for many of these horses. Now, Arcangelo, interesting. If he's got any little foot issue or anything like that, down on the inside, breaking from post one, that could get interesting because horses from the rail, unless they make the lead and hold their position, they're going to have the field kind of come down on them. It's a long run from the top of the stretch, but there is a little chain reaction that goes with being an inside horse and horses start crossing over in front of you. So, he might catch himself or catch a quarter of another horse if he's got a little foot problem. So that is of some concern, being down on the rail, and given the issues that we've heard earlier this week, you kind of like a horse like that to kind of be on the outside and in the clear and on their own and not have to worry about any of that other stuff when you're kind of worried about a little bit of the noise with the foot. So not a great draw, I don't think, for Arcangelo, but I have a ton of respect for the horse. I can only see the classic three ways. I'll be shocked if it's not. It's Ushba Tesoro from Japan, or Arcangelo, or Arabian Night, the two American 3-year-olds. I just think they stand out against the rest of this field. We'll see how it shakes out. No huge big winners, losers to the post draw, but I don't really like the draw for Arcangelo in this particular spot. And being away from Ushba Tesoro turns out to be pretty good for everybody else. who's not down in his neighborhood. Let's go to the 10th race. We've got 2 more to get through here, and we'll go to the Turf Sprint next. This is after the Breeders' Cup Classic. For the first time in history, the Breeders' Cup Classic will not wrap up the card. And you might be asking why. The Breeders' Cup is broadcast by NBC Sports. This year, for the first time, NBC has a college football contract with the Big Ten Network to broadcast Saturday night games. So NBC's got to get off the air. And when those races get off the air and go to college football, there's still 2 left. Keep it on national TV in front of the most eyes. So I understand why it goes as race number 9 for the Classic, but we will have races 10 and 11 after. It's because of a new college football contract with NBC. So now you know the rest of the story, as Paul Harvey would have said back in the day. 5 furlongs on the turf for the Turf Sprint, 12 go. That's the capacity field they allow. 4 also eligibles are in this field. Now, Arzak is the clear loser of this draw because when he won at Keeneland, I loved him that day in the Woodford Turf Sprint. He had the primo post-draw, 3, 4, and 5 in full field turf sprints at Keeneland. You know I've said that for years if you followed me. Arzak had a beautiful draw that day, came up the inside. Everything worked swimmingly. Now he's stuck harpooned in the 12 hole with a short run to the first turn. This is not a good spot out here for Arzak. Motorius, the locally based horse who I was thinking about making my top pick, I've got to think a little harder now. The 10 hole is not a great spot, I don't think, for Motorius. This one under Flavian Pratt's going to have to maybe overcome a tough post. Big Invasion down on the rail. That's a tough spot. He doesn't have a lot of speed. They're going to come crashing down on him. Brad Sell, a European, they're going to come crashing down on. Caravel's going to have to get out of there. If Caravel breaks quickly, she's fast. You know, last year she won the Breeders' Cup race in the Turf Sprint at 42-1. She's only 5-1 in John White's morning line this time around. And I'm not complaining about the price. I'm just saying if you didn't get her at 42-1, is this a tougher spot than last year? I don't know. Field-wise, it seems maybe like last year might have been a touch tougher with what ended up in this particular field. Caravel could repeat, but you're going to get a much shorter price to find out. Tony Ann beat her at Keeneland last time, right next door. You're getting 15-1 there. No balls in here. The 7 is the speed of the race. He is fast. I think he'll probably outbreak all these and get to the front. We shall see as far as, who can work out a trip going 5/8 of a mile on turf. Not a bad draw for Caravel, though. She's fast, and she's definitely going to outbreak the 2 inside of her. Should outbreak Tony Ann, I would think, being inside of Tony Ann, I think she'll get the jump on her this time. No balls. The 7's going to go for the front, though. We'll see if he clears over in front of a couple others. Living the Dream, definitely one to watch in here. 9-2. That's the morning line favorite. European runner who ran really good at Keeneland, got nailed on the wire last time at Keeneland, maybe makes the lead. So you got the 7 and the 5 who are really fast in here. The 3, Caravel. They kind of conceded the front last time at Keeneland. I don't think they're going to concede the front here in a field of 12. I think they're going to be up there battling for it. So look for the 3, the 5, the 7, 3, 5, and 7, all to show speed in here. How do you think the rest of the field sets up and shakes out? Who can get the trip? Who can finish? That's how you're going to handicap the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint in there. But definitely a tough draw for Arzak and a pretty hard draw for Motorius, both horses I have a lot of respect for. I was on paper looking at the pre-entries. I was ready to make Motorius my top pick. I don't know now. I'm going to have to reevaluate a little bit, and he's going to have to convince me he's way better than the field to win in the 10 hole, I think. And that still may happen, but we're going to have to keep our evaluation and our mind open on that. Let's go to the final race here as we handicap and look ahead at the post-position draw, just taken a little over an hour ago in Los Angeles. The 9-horse Breeders' Cup Sprint wraps things up. Final race on the card, Breeders' Cup-wise. 6 furlongs, just a field of 9 here. Again, disappointing that we didn't get a bigger field, especially in a year where I don't think there's a standout sprinter. I'm not sure where the rest of the sprinters in the country are. Echo Zulu might have beat this field. We were talking about her for the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Sprint. That was 7/8 of a mile. Had she not got injured and wanted to stay at 3/4 of a mile, she could have been awfully tough in the Breeders' Cup Sprint against the boys. Dr. Shivels, the one of the top Californians, I might say the top Californian. He's coming off a win last time out in the local prep race for this. He's awfully tough. The Chosen Vron Calbred won the big one at Del Mar to Bing Crosby this summer. He is very, very tough for a state bred, and he can win in open company. He's rattled off 7 wins in a row, or 8 in a row now. The speed in the race might be Speedboat Beach, the 7, though. This is the horse who might get the front in this spot. He is training very, very well. There's a lot of talk, a lot of heat, a lot of hype going for Speedboat Beach. I think he may go favored. Defending champ in this race is Elite Power at 9-5. John White did not put much between those two in the morning line. 9-5 and 3-1. That's like, 1.2 points difference. 9-5 is 1.8 to 1, 3-1. Obviously, is 3-1. So there's not a lot of difference in John White's line. If you like Speedboat Beach and you're sitting around and waiting for him in the last race, try to get a look at the daily doubles from the turf sprint to the sprint at the end and see what the public's doing with that horse, because my gut tells me he is going to get hammered at the windows. And it's Baffert. It's the last race on the card. I think Speedboat Beach is going to get bet really hard in the Classic. He's probably the speed in this particular spot. We'll see how it shakes out. Elite Power, the 9-5 morning line favorite, hasn't been quite as good this year as he was last year, but there's not a whole lot of tail off in his form. He looks a lot like Cody's Wish does in the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. They're defending champs who don't look quite as good as they did last year for Bill Mott. Maybe you get a little sense. I know these are two different horses and it's apples and oranges, but if Cody's Wish really runs well in the Dirt Mile for Mott, it'll at least let you know that the barn can get a great horse who was a tad off form back for the big event and hit the date. If Cody's Wish runs big in the Dirt Mile, that might foretell a little bit that we think that the same thing could happen with Elite Power in the sprint. If Cody's Wish form continues to go a little further south and looks like he's slipping and doesn't run well in the Dirt Mile, maybe you look at Elite Power and think that he's a little bit more vulnerable. Again, two different horses, two different scenarios, but boy, they do look a lot like on form. And for me, it's pattern repetition and what I've seen and playing concentration when it comes to handicapping. I've seen this happen before. I've seen this happen before. Can I see it happen again? And logically put the dots together. That's the way I like to handicap. So I'll get a little bit of line on Elite Power for the sprint by what Cody's Wish does in the Dirt Mile, but it won't completely sell me one way or the other. I do not have a pick yet at this point in the Breeders' Cup Sprint, but if you had to hold me to it, I love that Calbred, the Chosen Brawn. He's an awfully good one. We'll see if we end up going with him on top. I think he'll be the value because I think people will be a little bit scared of the Calbred part of it. Dr. Shivel will get bet, a horse who just missed by a nose in this race at Del Mar a couple of years ago. Elite Power is going to get bet. Goodnight likes to get bet. The public likes to bet Goodnight 4-1 on John's line to the outside. So be no surprise there at all if the Chosen Brawn, even with 8 straight wins, is 4th or 5th choice in this race, and he's, co-4th choice in the morning line. I wouldn't be surprised if Dr. Shivel takes more money than he does. So I kind of look at him as the 5th betting choice in the race, and that could be good value, the Chosen Brawn. All right, that's going to wrap up this edition of the Breeders' Cup Rapid Reaction from First Bet and Xpressbet. I'm Jeremy Plonk. Follow me on Twitter at HorsePlayerNow, and be sure to go to Substack and sign up for my Substack there, jeremy.plunk@Substack. And you can get free email information for horse racing sent directly to your inbox, no charge for it whatsoever on Substack. I will have my full card Breeders' Cup selections available through Substack only, so be sure to go there and sign up. Again, substack.com, and then look for jeremy.plunk, Plonk. That's going to wrap it up. On behalf of everybody with First Bet and Xpressbet, go download the Breeders' Cup Wager Guide from First at first.com/guide. Good night, everybody. Good luck in the Breeders' Cup. Be sure to join Jeff Siegel and I on Tuesday for the It's Official podcast.